say, yes, we do. Please. Thank you. But if we could have a motion on the minutes from October and a second.
I move that we accept the minutes from October 8th with it.
And I second that.
Are there any comments or corrections, or are they fine as they are? All in favor? Thank you. We do not have public comment again this evening. Director's report.
So my apologies, I sent the wrong report from a year ago.
I looked at that and I saw stuff about the roof and I'm like, wait a minute, what the?
So I hope you all got to look at this when I sent it today, but anyway, it's a fairly uneventful month in terms of like, huge momentous things, but it was still a busy one. So the long range plan, Joanne and I continue to plug along on this. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that spreadsheet that Lynn was alluding to earlier, but the numbers here, I mean, this is really just a big data dump to take the things out of the Google format and just put them in a spreadsheet all in one place. And then there was a little bit of, hand math or spreadsheet math that had to be done in terms of particularly, I mean, I'd already done this and I shared it with you when we met previously, putting some of the stuff about the demographics of the people that took the survey, and so we've already worked with that. But generally, the other things were just sort of taking them and putting them into the document. So what I'm hoping that we're going to do is have a little bit of time for everyone to look at this, make observations, just make comment to see what pops out, because there are definitely things in here that are interesting. There are also some things that seem as muddy and murky as ever, but it will help us to figure out our next steps in terms of potentially going back to the members of the public to speak.
And I'm sorry, I meant to call you Jay and say this, but I was wondering too, when I was thinking about it, if we should think about, and maybe it's wait till after the holidays, but I don't know, maybe it's already too close to the holidays, about having like either a trustee night where I'm happy to do it, we just open it up and explain the results to anybody that wants to come in, or even I was thinking about this when I was here on Saturday, maybe like listening sessions, like if there was like a trustee here, maybe we cover a Wednesday night, we kind of try to cover some of the more populous times and just be here to like talk to people about what we're doing and just have like a little desk and like talk to a trustee. Just
Could I have a balloon?
Yeah.
Helium balloon.
Just like something to keep in mind as we go through this, like not something I really formalized for tonight's meeting,
Right.
but just something I'd love for us to keep in mind, because I think it's important, especially like in like going through the bylaws with you yesterday. It was like really formulating for me. Like maybe we need to have some like listening sessions.
It might be great to just have, because again, you don't want to be kind of like Lucy in the stall there with the psychiatric advice 5 cents. I think that it might be good to like have like a regular night, like on a Wednesday evening, to have one or two trustees just kind of like on a rotating schedule, just hanging out, have a thing of coffee or some kind of refreshment and some munchkins or whatever, and then just have people just like wander up and get the munchkins and start talking and keep it really informal in that way.
Because I was thinking when I came in on Saturday, I hadn't been here for a while because I've been away for a lot of weekends. And I don't know, I must have talked to like 6 different people while I was standing there, and it was funny because Karen said, "You're always like talking to everybody, you know everybody." And I thought, I thought it's my job. But it is my job. Like when I'm in the library, like our job is to be here to hear what people have to say and to like, and so I thought, oh, I should do this more often. Like it's really important that we do that and hear what people say. Not that I had any big revelations on Saturday, but it was good to
But
like,
if we did every other month or something.
Right.
Two of us.
Right.
Yeah, or if we did it during the day too, I mean, there's a whole
Right.
different group of people during the day than.
Right.
And, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm available, yeah.
Can I just sort of, since we're having this conversation, I figured I would pass out my slightly revised version. I don't think there's necessarily anything particularly notable on the first page. The second page, I think it's interesting to look at how do you use the library, which is the second item down. And then at the top of the third page,
Well, I'm sorry, was there something in particular that you thought was, that you wanted to call out?
No, I that's just the data as it was. I didn't fiddle with any of that. But what I did do on which of the following days times would you prefer? That's on top of page 3. I arranged those by what got the most votes, and I kind of clumped the others. So the most votes were for Saturday afternoon. And then,
but nothing, I mean, when we went through this, I think one of the things we noted is nothing was really telling. Nothing was giant, like hugely different.
Yeah, I mean, Saturday afternoon, we're already open Saturday afternoon, so.
right,
Yeah.
but rather than look at it in terms of the week, where it's hard to see what the demand is, I just rearranged the data according to the number of votes for a particular time.
Yes.
And so that might be somewhat helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this is one of the things that is really, and this is kind of like what I was alluding to when I was saying that some things just remain murky because, you know, you could say, well, okay, wow, well, in the top 5 here, we've got Wednesday evening, and it can be busy if people are coming here for a program, and maybe that's what people are alluding to because they want to avail themselves of the ability to use the building for things other than just simply coming in to browse or do whatever they do. Because by and large, those evening hours are quite quiet. I mean, Wednesday evening after 6, if there's nothing going on, it gets dead quiet. Same thing with Mondays and Fridays. So it's always tough to parse this because you don't want to like go to the mat to try to allocate resources for a time when if someone disinterested wandered in, then you're like, there's nothing going on in here because it's true. There would be less happening on those times than maybe some other times. I mean, I think it's interesting that the demand for morning hours on those days when we open late isn't higher in the survey results because those are some of the things that anecdotally we hear in comments that people wish we were. Why can't you just be open every day at 10? I'm like, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but if we did that, we'd have to cut the evening hours, or we'd have to do something else.
I was not trying to push any agenda. I was
Yeah,
just
no,
looking for a way to present the data that made a little more sense in my head rather than, how many times did the number 46 show up? That's all.
Yeah, and I just want to say that this is one of those things where as much as I would love, this is one of the reasons why it would be great to have more discussion with real people about what these numbers could possibly mean, because there's really nothing that's a slam dunk in what came back in the survey on that topic.
And you don't know if people are just used to those hours, so they check them. I mean, like Friday nights, we were originally open because we were a video lending library, right? Like that's why we used to be open on Friday nights. Now people have Netflix and Hulu and people don't need to come here on Friday nights anymore. Yet people selected it and I don't think, probably if you looked at the numbers, your numbers on Friday nights are probably pretty low.
Yeah,
Like, you
I
had
mean, we
pointed
have some
out.
dedicated regulars that, and you know, it's
Right.
great, they're predictable, and we see them all the time, but they're not, it's not like just an unpredictable, oh wow, big rush at, 6:30 on
Right.
Friday night, it just rarely happens.
And how late are you open on Saturday afternoon? Is it 3?
So, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if maybe what that means about Saturday afternoon is maybe just a little longer.
Yeah.
Maybe people just can't get here before you close at 3, maybe if you closed at 5.
Yeah.
I know you're
Then
gonna
it's
laugh at
really
me,
fun.
but I often think we should have the same hours on Saturday as the dump.
Yep.
Because I know that sounds really weird,
Well,
but I
then
feel
I'm
like
open
it's
at
like.
7 in the morning.
No, but I mean staying open as late as the dump, because I feel like people, that's like a circuit people do, right? Like,
Or maybe like an hour after the dump.
the dump closes at 4 on Saturday.
So-
It's we're the last people in all the time. I feel like that's like a town thing you do, and I've always thought of that, like, oh, I wonder if we like aligned with the dump, but that's just like my feeling, I don't know if that's.
And then I thought the satisfaction, the next one, the satisfaction with pick a thing. It's pretty remarkable the degree to which folks are pretty highly satisfied, which is a good thing. I think satisfaction with staff. It was interesting to me, staff interactions, it was how not applicable or high had so many more votes than any of the other things. Which is good. I'm glad they love the staff because I think they're great. Under the programming you would like to see of the options, I ordered them from highest to lowest, just to make it a little easier to understand.
So is this, like, did you do this, like, I don't know how to ask this question, like, just because you wanted to look at the data this way? Like, I'm just a
It
little
started out
confused.
because I didn't want to print that whole thing out because I don't have legal paper at home.
Oh. Okay.
That's what it started as. And so some things I ended putting across rather than they had been down. Adequacy of the collections, the greatest response is a black cell with white letters, and then a high response is the gray with white letters. And I thought it was fascinating that several things were very close in getting a 3, 4, or not applicable. And if you could parse that by age of the respondent, I think that would be interesting. But I don't have that kind of information, and I'm not sure I would really know what to do with it. I don't think I did very much to any of the other things. But it was just a way to condense it to some degree, and I don't know, it made sense to me rather than just trying to look at it on a screen. And this is not to say in any respect that I am lobbying for us doing one thing or another next. It was just a way for me to look at it and think about it more precisely, and I thought maybe somebody else would find it useful as well. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that well, I would say that just from cursory, going through the stuff, it is heartening that I think general satisfaction with services and staff collections is relatively high. I think there's stuff to be learned here, but I don't think that there is anything in here that makes us think like we're totally missing the boat on some huge, aspect of service delivery that we need to catch up on. I think there's kind of things that we already do that we need to work on more. I think a lot of these things around programming, there's definitely room for improvement, but that is, like everything else, we need more resources to be able to do it. So that's sort of like the next stage to figure out how we can get more emphasis to those things in reality, because it's not reasonable to expect with this, the size of the staff now to be able to just flip a switch and do 12 of all programs, for instance. So that's going to be like something that we're going to be, the staff and I will be talking about and are already talking about as far as putting together our budget for FY26. No,
26,
yes,
yeah.
26. These numbers don't even mean anything anymore. They're just but yeah, so that's something that we're talking about, because I do think the at the top of the wish list will be to hire another part-time staff person to focus on adult services, sort of like a corresponding staff person to what Emily does, for instance, the services coordinator position, but on the adult side, to help specifically with programming and to give Sue a hand collaboratively in terms of, again, devising programming, to have all the staff that deal in programming to be able to work collectively, because some of the staff work on adult programming too, so it doesn't need to be a hard and fast thing. It's just putting more brains and hands on this. And so that's going to be the goal, to try to expand the staff and have a new staff person in place for FY26. So we'll see how that goes. So next steps will be for Joanne and I to meet up and take on board any comments that the rest of you may have, to go through and just sort of do a deep dive into what this step suggests and start putting it into another, into a more user-friendly format, in charts and graphs, and then also to decide where we want to have that additional public input. And then once we have that in hand, we'll start working on a draft of the long-range plan with the goal of having it done by the end of the year or early in the new year. So we'll see how that pans out. Website is coming along. The thing we're working on right now is getting library calendar up and running. The library staff are working on creating test events to sort of figure out how the system works, and then very shortly, as we get into the month and they start figuring out the schedule of programs for December, they will start creating live actual events that will, when we go live around the beginning of December, that will be already populated and it'll turn on and people will be able to see it and reserve their space for a program. Yes.
I'm sorry, you showed us a very nice design that you were working on, asparagus, Hadley Public Library, I presume for the front piece of the website. But when I go, it's still at this point, if I go to the Hadley Public, I get to the town,
This is not
layout,
published.
which is
It's not-
just,
it's not live.
No,
It's all going out. It's
so once you get that, the town one will no longer be the front piece of the website, will not be the homepage.
Correct.
Okay,
I don't.
great.
I have to speak with the town administration. And I need to speak with Civics Plus, which is the company that runs the town's
Yeah.
website, to remove a lot of that content. There's going to be probably a limitation on. I probably will not be able to remove the entirety of it, but there probably will be a
Some of it
page
is-
on the larger town website that says, information about the library, and then you'll click on that to go to the site proper. But I think there are going to be issues of legality where things like meeting minutes and meeting, obviously and the agendas and calendars, that all has to be on the official town site.
But if you search for Hadley Public Library, which would come up, the town interface or the new, what you get, homepage?
They both would.
They both would, but which one will come up as the top
First,
result,
yeah.
that's going to be probably a function of traffic over time. So once traffic starts going to that will become the top result.
Okay.
And South Hadley will be right there next to it,
That's right.
if not mixed in the middle.
it always comes up.
Mhm.
And Patrick, what's the name of the tool that you're using?
Squarespace.
Yeah.
So this month we have the second reading of the proposed amendment to the meeting room policy. And I don't know if there was any additional commentary about that, but obviously there's no one here to speak to it from the public.
In that case, could we please have a motion to amend the meeting room policy, incorporating the additional language into a second?
I'll make that motion,
Thank you.
as you stated.
To add the language when scheduling a recurring event, etc. Is there any further discussion about that? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
Great. And then this month we have finally received our Wi-Fi hotspots that we'll be able to lend to members of the public. We got those through the town's T-Mobile account. We have our own billing set up for that, and we have in hand 5 functioning hotspots that people can use. They've already been used in a perfunctory way by folks for whatever reason who want to use them for a meeting that was taking place in the meeting room. They do work. And so we put together a policy based on much online discussion, much hand-wringing, much complaining, because apparently this is something that with many of the libraries that lend these, it is the bane of the existence of the libraries because they are very high maintenance. A lot of people borrow them, don't return them, then they have to be deactivated, replaced, deal with broken equipment, et cetera. So, so again, our investment in these comes at a time where for a long period of time, we never had anyone ask about them. We never had it. It never came up. At a certain point, people started asking about them with more regularity, and then we had to kind of work with the town to deal with their existing accounts. It took a little while to do it, but we did finally get it. But we wanted to sort of dip the toe in rather than like jumping in because we don't know how long this is going to be a thing. We didn't want to do, and it's an expense. So we didn't want to do, like 20 of them. We just wanted to see how it would go with 5, see what the pitfalls are, see how popular they are. And based on the experience of other libraries that have been doing this for a good period of time, we came up with a policy that seems to, I think, protect the interests of the town, taxpayers, everything else. That this is a resource like the Library of Things that in this case is limited to residents of the town. So we're hopefully not going to see people coming in and then taking the thing to another community and then see them again. This is a very resource-intensive collection for what it is. The whole Library of Things is in its way, and we really feel that it is appropriate in this sense to sort of limit the scope of it rather than to have it. That flies in the face of the general principles of the way the library typically works. But in this case, we can't be all things to all people, and to do this, which again is very labor intensive, we really need to kind of limit it. So we think the policy does a good job of covering us in that way. You must be a Hadley resident, you must be 18 years or older, you must have an active CW Mars card in good standing in order to borrow. We will have a signature form that indicates that you have read the policy at the time you check it out, and you keep that on file, and then we're going to be working on the procedurally how this is all going to work behind the desk in terms of tracking it. Yeah.
I just missed your question, Jack. What if you're homeless and like your address isn't, you don't have an address, but you're in Hadley and you could really benefit from Wi-Fi?
I think in that case, that is a good question. I'm trying to think of like how we've done that and when registering a patron without an address, but,
Yeah, I was just curious, I'm not trying to judge, I just was thinking about that.
that would be something we'd have to work on if it actually came up. And we'd have to figure out like, well,
Right.
where is this patron registered to? You know?
And in general, like, if you're homeless and you're registering for a library card, do you just write no address and get a library card? Like,
I'm trying to think of an instance where that's actually happened here. It probably has, but it happens so infrequently that I just can't recall what we did in that instance. It's not something that we have codified in policy, so that I'm aware of. I can't recall it being up for much discussion because we definitely have some patrons that are on house, but I can't remember if they already have library cards or if we don't. So.
Can you speak to who's been checking them out as of this time?
Well, at this point, they haven't been checked out because we needed to have this policy in place. And so that, again, is going to be a slight delay. We're probably going to do sort of the soft opening in the same way that we did with the library things in general, and sort of use the next month until this is, approved at a second reading to, lend them out on a limited basis. But yeah.
I was looking at some other libraries' policies, and one I saw that I thought might be a useful thing to incorporate was that they present the library card and a photo ID. Or maybe it's enough for you that they're in the CWR's database.
I think if they have, again, we're limiting this to Hadley residents. So if they have a Hadley library card, that indicates that they presented a photo ID at the time of their, being issued a library card.
That's fine.
And that is, and we also, confirm every 2 years people's
Right.
information. So
my guess is though that's so nobody else uses your card. Like, you don't give out your card and say,
Right.
"Oh, go get your Wi-Fi with my card." But Hadley's such a
Well,
small
right, but
community,
if-
you generally know the people. Yeah.
well, maybe, but if you, Joanne, give Jack your library card in order to go and do that, and then Jack doesn't return it.
You're still responsible
You're
for
still
it.
a Hadley
Yeah,
resident.
that's
and
true.
if you did
That's
that, you're
a good
on the
point.
hook.
Right.
You know where to find you, as opposed to,
Mhm.
nobody's getting in a car and drive to Greenfield or wherever, or Hammersmith. So, yeah, it just limits the amount of mayhem that we may have to deal with. There is a limit to the time that the devices go out. We are limiting them to 2 weeks. And one of the things that we've heard from other libraries is that people really, and I mean, we see this for other resources as well, that people will try to sort of game the system and try to figure out the shortest amount of time before they can come back and borrow the thing. And really, this is no substitute for reliable email service to people's residences. This is something we can provide, but it is something that people can use in a pinch when they need to be mobile and have reliable internet service, or knowing that they're going to have the ability to have internet service at their home for a period of time for whatever reason. This is something that can help people bridge that gap. It really can't do much more than that because we're just not in a position to do it.
If you're going away.
If you're going away,
It's
yeah,
like
there are any
a-
number of good
yeah.
reasons why this is a thing that people would, want to borrow. But yeah, we do want to limit, because it is a very finite resource, we do want to limit the amount of time that any one patron is borrowing the device and the resource. So for that reason, they cannot be renewed. And
Will you be able to set up whatever in the back end of the catalog to know that to know who all is in a household and whoever borrowed it last before they're able to borrow it again?
we're probably going to have to track that in some other way other than in the catalog. We can group patrons, but first off, we have to be able to confirm that we know who the patrons are. Because, for instance, we often we'll look up someone, by address or some other piece of information, and then we'll discover that because that address or phone number, well, generally the address is a rental property, you may discover that there have been 20 people associated with that address that are still associated with the address, but they don't live there, we don't know who's who. So it's not exactly easy to do that, so we may have to do a bit of, that may be part of the application.
I was also wondering if things like on the failure to comply point, where you have repeated failure to return a hotspot on time, I'm wondering if you would want to specify 2 times.
3 strikes and you're out. The idea of 3 strikes and you're out.
Or 2 strikes. I mean,
Yeah, but
specify a number rather than,
I think this one falls under discretion, personally, because again, there are people who have valid reasons and valid difficulty with these things. And it's part of the reason why we don't charge fines. We don't, as long as we get the things back in good condition. If we feel that there was a valid reason, then that's discretion as well. If we had 3 strikes and they were on 4, that's still a matter of discretion. So I think it's one of those things that if we need to tighten the policy up further because we see that this is actually a problem, then I think based on what we see in
we'd
the
rather
real world.
amend it later.
Yeah, rather amend it and just sort of see like what seems reasonable, because what is reasonable? Is it 3? Is it, I mean, I don't know. We'll see how much trouble this is.
I mean, other similar points are, after how long do you turn off the hotspot if it's not returned on time? How do you quantify what the severity of the damage is? And
I think if the thing is damaged in any appreciable way, if the thing comes back with a cracked screen, for instance, but it still works, I think we're going to have to charge them the replacement cost because that's going to shorten the life of the thing. But again, I think we're just going to have some of these things. I think we're going to have to learn on the fly, just like with meeting room policy, that we couldn't see every wrinkle until we were actually dealing with the things that people came in with, the challenges that we could never have imagined. I think we just kind of play it, kind of keep it. This is a pretty thorough policy. It leaves room for judgment in certain areas.
as long as that was intentional, I'm satisfied knowing that.
It is, but wait 2 months and then I'll come back and tell you how smart I was.
It'll be interesting to revisit this a year from now.
Oh, sure.
And see
Yes,
what
exactly.
we learned.
We may be on the listservs with our hair on fire like everybody else going, oh my God.
Forget it.
Why did I ever do this?
So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about the policy, which again, we'll have to revisit next meeting. And then I wanted to mention, I'm going to hurry to get out of the way here, that at the next meeting we hope to, in time for the Friends meeting, which is next week, and in time for the Trustees meeting next week, the staff and I we've already had discussions about this, but we're going to have a more formal discussion to create a list of all of the wish list of things that we would like to be funded by both the Friends or by the funds from the Charlotte Smith account. I have told told the folks that are kind of the people that are actually brainstorming the stuff to be bold and to, because there's a lot of great stuff out there. I mean, we did some great stuff for summer reading this year. That was primarily what we used Charlotte Smith money for. I've asked them to go back and now kind of extrapolate that out to the rest of the year and think about like what you would do with these resources if you were, because that's what we do with Friends, to do that with Charlotte Smith and think about what they would want to do for other opportune times like spring vacations or what have you. And we're going to have that to present for the trustees at the December meeting in hopes that we'll be able to have that money in hand to work right from the get-go at the beginning of 2025, because with a lot of these things, particularly some of the more ambitious programming, we need to be on their calendar like now. So look forward to that. And then children's well repair, that is seemingly complete. As far as I'm aware, it is fully complete. There's no not been presented with any bill. It's seemingly covered entirely by the insurance. I haven't heard anything other than that. The roof evaluation, we're supposed to have a report in time for the next trustees meeting. John Krupewski, who presented previously, intends to attend the next trustees meeting to present the report and answer questions. But I haven't seen the report, it's not complete yet, so I have nothing really to say about that. And then the access hardware, I had on here that there was no update, but in the meantime, as you may have heard, I can't remember if we talked about this previously, but there had been a complaint about the button not working. Not the gentleman that came to visit with us, but a patron who had actually come in and had difficulty, and I spoke with them at the time, explained the situation at that time. In the meantime, the door had been fixed, but she had gone over and spoken to the Board of Health about this, and I had been coming back and forth with Margaret Strangelo at the Board of Health, and I did have a conversation with her over the phone. When was that? Last week, I think, and explained the situation as it stands. Because again, I don't know that she's been in the building, so I had some of this was maybe a little bit abstract, but I had a conversation with Nikki at the senior center to ask, because one of the things that had come up in the email conversation was, well, what are we going to do about this door, and what are we going to do about that door? And I was kind of a little bit taken aback, because it's not typical to have mechanical operators on every door in the building. And so the question, and again, we're in compliance, we're not out of compliance in any way, shape, or form. But that conversation was taking place in an email thread with other staff members and stakeholders. And so I wanted to kind of jump in there and just sort of say, well, first of all, this is a discussion that we had previously with the building inspector. Our architect had shared the relevant code, had shown that we were in compliance, everything was good, we needed to get the button fixed, but now it's fixed. And then all of the other doors, like again, we're in compliance. Whether that's best practice or not is another question. And so Margaret had a number of questions about, well, what about the inner door? So the person coming in would not be able to get in the inner doors, is that what you're saying? And I said, well, not necessarily, but for, if anyone coming in with that sort of difficulty got to those doors, we would be, up to help them with the doors. Same with the doors to the children's room or the doors to this room, which don't have an operator on them. The restroom doors, anything. So I did say that based on the conversation that I would bring this up again with the trustees, and we would have a conversation about how we want to proceed. I did mention to her that, I felt that it was important when this topic is raised that it be part of, as with a lot of things, that it be part of a survey of all town buildings and not just something that pertains to the library, because these accessibility issues are rife throughout town buildings, and we're actually in pretty good shape relative to some of that. But I do think that it is imperative that we have the conversation to decide for the library, are we doing a good job in terms of accessibility? Are we doing everything that we could do and should do? And how do we go about determining what that should be? If we need additional equipment, want to invest in additional equipment for the inner doors to make it easy for folks who may be struggling with that to get in. And then again, what is the scope? Do we expand that to other doors? Are there other doors that are challenging? Do we want to add something to a particular restroom, for instance, and just mark that as accessible?
Are you asking us now to give?
I'm just sort of raising the subject and saying I don't know how to proceed, but I wanted to bring that to you all to see if you have thoughts on it and a sense of how we might go forward.
So, as someone who works with people with disabilities, that's my kind of, I understand and was here, and part of the thinking that you can always let somebody in because there's always someone facing the door, the second set of
On the
doors,
certain door.
right? There's always
On the
someone
certain-
standing there.
Well, always maybe is maybe overstating it, but most of the time, yes. Unless that person is.
That was
busy
the
or
thinking at
distracted.
the time,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And
there's always a piece of me that values independence, right? Like the ability to get places on your own. And I think for me, if you were asking my opinion, I would think, and maybe I'm wrong, the bathroom would be, like, if I was to go for the next thing, like say I was like, okay, well, maybe we'll do this step by step or think about it step by step. To me, like restroom independence almost seems more important if we were going in terms of like what we would do next. For me, I would think independence to use a restroom first. But that's just my feeling. I'm not telling you
I
to
think
be able to do
there
that.
are a number of rationales for why this equipment could be helpful to a number of different people
Right.
in different situations, in different locations within the library. It could be, you could be talking about a parent coming with a stroller that's kind of unwieldy and difficult to get through the inner doors to the children's room, for instance. One of the conversations that we had, that I had, part of the conversation with Margaret was, she said, well, why don't you just have like sort of magnetic, I don't know if this would actually work in this instance because of the way the door is configured, but she had suggested having one of those magnetic things where you open the door and the magnet just holds the door. There's like a magnet on the door and a magnet on the wall. It just holds it in place, which may or may not work in our situation. But she was saying, well, why don't you just do that? Of course, we could just use the door stop. We have rubber door stops all over the place. We could just leave the door propped open. And she said, well, why don't you do that? And I said, well, we could do that. But one of the reasons that the door generally remains closed is that, like any other vestibule, that area is kind of an airlock to keep the climate from escaping out the door every time someone pushes the button and the door stands up. And that's the way it was in the good one. I mean, those doors would open and they would stand open and we would sit there going.
Yeah.
Now we're much closer to the outside than we are here, but it's still an energy concern that you don't want all of the warm or cold air rushing out. And I also said that in our experience, again in the old good one, when children discover that those buttons are there and that they work, they are a great source of enjoyment and pleasure and wonderment for any child tall enough to reach that button and hit it. And so, that is a valid concern and a real concern because we continually are having children that come out that are, again, old enough to like open the doors and will go out into the lobby and we're kind of like, where's the parent? Like, what's going on? And so having that button where the door flies open and then they hit the next button and the door flies open and they're running full speed out of the parking lot is a valid concern. It's something that we need to talk about, and it's sort of like the flip side of this, that we don't really want to make it so easy for small children to run sitting out. Like,
For the point of comparison, what do they do with the Hadley schools?
good question, I don't know.
Do they have automatic openers at the elementary school and at the high school?
Good question, I don't know the answer to that.
I was going to suggest that, I think this is something that, like maybe minimum, yes, compliance with ADA is the entry level. But should the town be doing something more at all of its facilities? And if so, what should that be? And I'm wondering if sort of proposing the select board take a more holistic approach in the way that they're looking at solar energy.
Well,
we're not
I
just
do want to
talking-
say, there was actually an accessibility person that came through, like since we've been in this building, they've been doing some sort of survey in that regard around town. I don't know anything about the results of that work, but a report I believe was created that went around and made suggestions in the various buildings about what could be done. And going back to Nikki, because I think I jumped away from that before I finished that thought, but I did call Nikki up because again, when the conversation came out about multiple doors, I said, well, the other new building in town that really is a public building is the senior center. So I called Nikki and said, Nikki, is this something that you have in your building? Do you have operators on anything other than the outer, the doors to the exterior of the building? And the answer was no. They have a sliding door on the exterior and then a sliding door on the just above the
From the airlock into the building.
both sides of the vestibule, and that's it. So it's not like even in the Council on Aging where this is as much of a concern as it is in the library that any number of doors had operators on them. They don't. and they're in compliance, you know.
I also feel like, I think it's great to hear what the town wants, but we're also the stewards of this building, and if it's something that we felt strongly about, that's something we, you know, could spend our money on, if it was something we could, yeah.
I think it would be helpful to hear, you know, if this study has been done, I think we should
Oh,
find
yeah,
out
no,
what the results
absolutely,
are
yeah, right.
and what the recommendations are. And is there someone who's coordinating that? Is there, you know, are there steps planning to be taken? And I think once we have that information, that could inform what we choose to do or what we are asked to do. I don't know, but I will ask to find out where that might be.
I just thought it was important in speaking to someone from the Board of Health to make that point of view that again, if someone is making a complaint about a town building, that, again, from my point of view, and this is not to deflect, but this is that if someone is making a complaint, they're essentially making a complaint about town buildings generally, because not just about any one particular building, they're complaining about accessibility in town buildings. They just happen to be pointing to the library specifically and saying there's an issue here. But if that's coming up and it's something that needs to be corrected, it probably also needs to be corrected in other places, or at least examined.
Well, we'll find out and see what's there and figure out what the best way to move forward would be. One thing that wasn't on your report, and because we don't have a trustee liaison to the Friends, was there anything? They had their bake sale, and they had
their silent auction, which I don't have figures for you, but it was seemed very successful.
I know a couple of the things were sold for more than face value, but I don't know how many of them.
I couldn't tell you that. I don't think we've heard that. I don't think we've had a chance to talk about that. We won't have had until the meeting next week.
Okay.
There may have been some email about that. I don't know. And there's also a very cool speaking event tomorrow night in the library with Marla Miller, who will be speaking about women and labor in the age of revolution, so in the colonial and early American period. So that should be a really interesting talk for this room. And that's a Friends event.
And Marla is a good speaker. Okay. Anything else on your end before we move on to bylaws? I did share with you a current version of the draft, and Joanne and I as most senior, had a chance to talk about things last night, and she had some questions, and I had answers to all of the things, and there were a couple of items that we wanted to go over. I don't know if you have the copy of it with you, but under responsibilities, Article 3, there had been a sentence that said two trustees are needed to sign bills before they are put on the town warrant. And I said, I don't know what this means. What are we doing putting these on the town warrant? And besides, we voted a while ago that only one trustee needed to sign the bills in order to submit them for payment. And Joanne explained that they used to call that the town warrant anyway. And I'm like,
Well, they still do.
They still do.
That's the terminology, yeah. Each warrant has a number. It's, that's, now it's by, those are 2 weeks. And it's like this, warrant 25 for fiscal year 10 or something based on.
well, in any event, it's only one trustee is required to
Yes,
sign.
that is true.
now.
That was changed.
For clarity's sake, would it be acceptable to say one trustee is needed to sign bills before they are submitted for payment?
You look at me, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I think, I don't see the point of changing the language if it worked. I think just the number is the important part. But however you want. I don't think it changes the meaning significantly, but.
So you're proposing that instead of the sentence saying 2 trustees are needed to sign bills, you're proposing 1 trustee?
Well, we already voted that.
The trustees already changed that because it was such a struggle to get 2 signatures, particularly in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, when we kind of like got out of the doing everything electronically and back to doing things like in person. It was becoming challenging to get the 2 signatures in a timely fashion, even by email. It was challenging. So we reduced it to 1. I went to the town and said, "Is there a reason why we have to have 2?" And they said, "No, that was your decision." So we came back and voted, and now it's 1.
My guess would be it was done as 2 as just sort of a safety check.
Yeah.
I suspect so. I mean, if everybody else understands town warrant to mean whatever payment is made, that's fine, but that term used this way was totally unfamiliar to me.
If it's used with town-wide, then I think
It is
it makes
just
sense.
That's fine, but I'm just saying,
Right, it is confusing, especially here in Fall Town Meeting Week. I think a warrant completely differently than that.
precisely, a warrant are the articles on which you are being asked to.
But it is, just as a point of clarification, it is something that goes before the select board votes on it. It is, that's the process. It is, it's
They're
not,
doing
it's
it.
not as straightforward as like, well, the trustees approve it and then it's submitted for payment. No, it's then forwarded to the select board and the select board looks at it and they approve it.
Yeah.
Then that's fine, we'll just leave it. I have. One other of the things that Joanne and I talked about was the portion that states that officers shall serve no more than 3 consecutive terms in any one position.
Are you still in Article 3?
No, I have moved to Article 4, I'm sorry.
I would, when I mentioned to Linda, I violated that unknowingly.
It doesn't seem to be a penalty stated though.
But how do you undo all those years of being chair?
If you would only have them back,
I
Joanne.
know, my family would love that. I just pointed out to Lynn, like, we were thinking about the positives and the negatives, and, if there's no one to step up for chair, it's a tough situation, and then we also talked about someone taking power and, misusing it and coercing other people into voting for them, and that could, but we had to be honest about what could happen, right? Like, we kind of talked it through, Lynn and I'm still leaning in favor of taking out the term limits, only because there have been times where there's just no one. Like, someone might be in a position where they're able to take that role for a long time, while other people are really busy and unable to.
And it's not as though you can simply just nominate yourself and you're it.
Right, you have to get everyone to agree.
Right.
You could
have a
coerce
majority
people,
vote.
pay them. Look, they give me a 20.
Too bad Jack only got 5. If someone else has different views or an opinion, by all means, say something. Or if you think eliminating that restriction makes sense, then I would be happy to delete it.
I'd be in favor of eliminating it.
Thank you, Julie.
need a second on that?
No, but I'm just trying to get a sense
Okay.
of,
Mhm.
and this also requires a second reading. We can't,
Yes.
we're not going to vote on it today. Then I will take silence as tacit agreement.
And then you have another, a similar issue under Article 5 for meetings, the May meeting.
Well, Joanne had no idea what an annual meeting was, and I didn't either.
I think we should just get rid of that. I don't think we've ever done that.
An annual meeting, or what that would,
Well, there's always a meeting at which, following the election, that's when the officers are.
Oh, do you think that's what they meant? But then they should say when
but it
officers are
says,
elected. But
no, it does.
yeah,
It already says
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it's the same with Friends, it's, well, they don't have an election.
yeah, but they're a nonprofit. Like, to me, an annual meeting is like, Lynn and I were talking, like, if you're a 501c3, you have to legally have an annual meeting. We don't
Yes, but
have
I mean,
to
as far
legally
as,
have one,
right,
like, what?
but as far as I'm concerned, the only actual
Yeah.
business that seems to be attended to is just the
Yeah.
electing. That's all the business, I mean, there could be other business, but that's the only business that I've ever seen happen of that nature.
No, that's,
It seems it could be of value to pull that.
So the
Yeah, I
library
was
is
in
not a
favor of pulling it out.
501c3? So
No.
donations to the library are not tax deductible?
So
They are.
because right now the money we have either goes to the, we have a community foundation fund.
Mm-hmm.
So those are definitely tax deductible. because
So
they
if
come
you
to the
give through
community
that,
foundation.
because it just goes, it all filters through there. And
But you can give to the
The
town.
town,
directly.
and
That's
right,
also
the other
ta-
goes
that's
to
also,
the town.
Yeah.
Nonprofit. I don't know what the actual tax designation is as a municipality, but for all intents and purposes, it's.
Yeah.
But we're not a separate, like, I believe the Jones, the trust, they actually are a separate 501c3, right? Is it the Jones?
They have sort of a hybrid with
Forbes
where
is-
they get some funding from the town, but they're sort of standalone.
We're
like
not
Williston
that.
might be that way too. or
There's all
that
kinds of
one
different
is-
models
yeah.
of how this works in different places, but yeah, we're just straight up a town department.
Mhm.
Back to the annual meeting one. The
Sorry.
Point just, no. The point just above there says that members will be elected to fill these positions at the regular board meeting, not the annual meeting, immediately following the annual town election.
Which works too, because like the elections have been, like this time the election was in May, not in April, right? Was
I
it
think
the
they
election in May?
permanently moved it to May.
Right, so if our meeting had been, like, say it happens that our meeting is before the election,
Right.
that May is a really bad idea, whereas immediately after the election makes more sense.
Then, having covered that elsewhere, we will eliminate that. I had also, one of the things that really stood out to me, screaming that these needed to be updated, was the fact that it specified trustee meetings were the second Tuesday in the library at 7 o'clock. And I'm like, but what if you get a trustee or a library director who can't make that time regularly, which... So in addition to the fact that we are now officially the Hadley Public Library, not the Goodwin Memorial. What else did you ask, Joanne?
So you're proposing to remove that wording that specifies the second Tuesday of the month?
That is already eliminated in my, a lot of editing took place between the 2015 version and what I distributed as a draft.
Yeah. I just want to say, as someone who went through the draft with Lynn, one of the things Lynn did that you probably can't see unless you went through the fine-tooth comb and really looked at it, is I feel like Lynn simplified a lot and referred back to Mass General Law, which I think is really good and clean, because if there's ever a question, it just points you back to the law. There's no interpretation. And if the law changes ever so, it just, I think it just really cleaned it up a lot. I really liked that about what Lynn did to it. I thought it was a lot easier to read and to follow. So, yeah. I think I only had one other thing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the other thing that we talked about a lot was the original version goes on at considerable length under Article 2, Number 5, about a member who misses 3 consecutive meetings or 4 in a calendar year, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And the fact of the matter is, as an elected officer, unlike an appointed board where someone can be removed from membership on a board, commission, committee, that is not possible when you're elected. It would have to be a recall election, which in fact would require special legislation by the state in order to conduct that and to go from there. And if I understand that there have been problems in the past, will there be problems in the future? Entirely possible. But I am inclined to think that rather than specify some prescriptive measures to take, that it be the decision of the fellow board committee members at the time how that should be addressed, which is why I simply left it to say that trustees shall attend board meetings regularly.
There was also some clause in there that was like, it seemed a little like passive aggressive, like, we'll tell you you should consider resigning. Like it felt a little divisive.
Where was that in the 2015? Was it in the 2015?
Yes, it is. Article 2, Number 5.
Article 2, gotcha.
And then the other question Joanne had, and this is not one that I had thought about before, was should there be mention of a role for trustees in raising outside money from just what's allocated by the town? And it does say,
Ends in public relations, right?
This was one of those things that we went to the MBLC and we were really actively fundraising for the capital campaign. I don't remember what it was, because the thing was I went to the MBLC as director, because just talking to fellow directors, like it was all over the place what people were doing and what they said they were allowed to do, what they said they weren't allowed to do. So I went to the MBLC and I got guidance on that. And then when I asked them, well, what about trustees? They said, well, we can't tell you about that because you're not a trustee. And then Karen Hurley went to them and got a written statement from that. We had to go back and compare what the actual, what the, again, MGL said about what could be done, because as elected officials, you can't really go down and ask people for, I think there was a limit to what could be done there. I think the trustees could go to a meeting where something like that was discussed, but they couldn't actually be the person. Similarly, I couldn't either. We weren't supposed to be asking someone at a bank directly for a donation. Somebody from the capital campaign could, but we could be there for informational reasons to talk about a project or a function of the library. So I don't know, you may want to trim.
But I thought then, like, then how are we supposed to, well, that's a separate conversation, maybe we should like grow our funds at the community, the community foundation or wherever we choose.
Well, there's a lot of like organizational work that's, you just can't literally be the person that asks you. Again, this is how I remember it.
So then let's leave it out. Let's not cause any, I mean, I'm in favor of just leaving it out for now. And that's like research we do. Like, it seems silly to put it in there.
But this is why we struggled, and we had to.
I remember, I know I've been back and forth about this so many times.
Yeah, that would be the dedicated asker, and it wasn't.
okay. All right, then we will not. So I will clean this up, and I will send you a clean version sooner rather than later, and ask you to look at it carefully and let me know in advance. I mean, there is another opportunity to make changes, and I am absolutely happy to do so. So,
Yeah, thanks for taking this on, because this is
Yeah.
way beyond where I'm at in all of this. I guess I'm curious, at the end of the year, at the end of a calendar year, do your employees actually get any kind of end-of-year bonus? I don't know. No, I didn't know how that all
I'm
worked.
sorry to laugh at that question, but no.
Look at his eyes. No.
No, I mean, that's just not.
Towns
you
can't
know,
do that.
There's whatever the town, decides.
Like
as a
teachers
raise,
do.
as a raise or but that's, now that is going to be more codified in the union contract, because now all of our staff, well, not all of them, but all the staff that are qualified
That are
to be in the union will be covered by that, and the town has made a decision, they've made a, commitment to make sure that everyone who doesn't fall under the union, so the folks that are part-time, that they're essentially benefiting in the same way proportionally as the
Parents.
They have to legally, I think.
yeah, I don't know how it works legally, but that's what they're supposed to be doing. You can say that it's supposed to happen that way legally, but there are a lot of unions in town, and the people at town hall, for instance, were not benefiting. The people at the library were not benefiting based on in spite of those contracts existing. So I don't know how you determine like who falls under what umbrella, but it wasn't happening here, and that's what led to them, organizing. But yeah, no bonuses.
is there anything else?
Are we meeting on the 10th of December? Maybe
That's
the
plan,
second
is John.
December.
Yes.
Okay, I may have some problems getting here, I'm unsure yet.
Let me know.
I'll let you know
When that's
if it's
sorted
moved
out.
that day for school, for college, I don't know. I'm hoping not.
I would prefer a skip for that month.
Well, that was the
That's-
month we were hoping to propose the Charlotte Smith stuff, but that.
And also we have
It could wait.
John
The
talking
roof.
about the roof.
Oh,
That's why, yeah,
That's
if
the
I
big
can
one.
move my move out in any way, shape, if you don't really move out till you get my whole schedule, that's the problem with colleges. But I may force my daughter to wait in the morning.
I also wanted to mention that December 9th is the date that we are scheduled to, well, I am, but the library in general is on the agenda for the select board to give them a departmental update, which is something that all of the departments have been asked to do to get on the schedule, and just periodically come in and talk about what's
Do you want
going
us
on.
to be there?
I would love it. So my
Calendars.
goal was to really kind of was to have some of this long range plan stuff, sort of like we do with the demographic stuff, and like put together some highlights just to be able to talk about like what goes on here and show trends and usage. So there could be things in here statistically that aren't even, or in that presentation that are not even from this, but just like, like how do people use it year over year? Oh, they use it more, that kind of stuff.
Monday the 9th.
It's Monday, yes.
Do you know what
I can't
time?
remember. What do I
It
have?
should be.
I've done this one with
Sorry,
Wednesday.
that's not right. It's a Wednesday. What do I have? It's,
Would it be after?
oh, it's Wednesday the 18th.
Okay.
Wednesday the 18th. Sorry, I had it on the agenda as a day to get that together.
Okay.
Yes, so it's the Wednesday the 18th. My mistake.
If there is nothing else, I would be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?